Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Hello, and thanks so much for joining me for another week of Women to Watch. I'm Sue Rocco, and I'm so thrilled to be here broadcasting our very first show on 6abc.com. You can also continue to listen to the show on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT every week as well. If you're new to the show and not familiar with our watch team of on-air contributors, these are corporate partners who bring news and information from their industries to the show each and every week. And to learn more about the watch team and all things related to Women to Watch, you can visit womentowatch.net. That's women, the number 2, watch.net, N-E-T. I'm also excited to have with us at the end of today's show a brand new lifestyle watch partner. Sherry Morrison is going to be spotlighting women trailblazers in the field of art, fashion, restaurants, businesses, events, and retail each and every week. So I look forward to chatting with her at the end of the show today. So now I'm very honored and excited to welcome to the show Renée Williams. Renée is the Executive Director for the National Center for Victims of Crime. Renée, thanks so much for being here for our very first show on 6ABC.
Yes, thank you for having me. I was excited to be on the inaugural episode.
And we let you know at the very last minute, so
it's okay.
Way to be prepared. Yeah, exactly.
It look nice.
Thank you. Well, listen, I want to start, as I always do, and give our listeners a sense of where you came from and a little bit about your background. So tell us where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in a very small town called Hubbard, Ohio, and that is a suburb of a slightly larger but still small town called Youngstown, Ohio. And it's probably about 2 hours south of Cleveland and an hour north of Pittsburgh, so right in the middle there.
Okay. And can you tell me what mom and dad did?
My parents were both public school teachers. My dad taught high school English. My mom was a special education teacher in high school. And I will say I'm the only person to have broken out of that family. That is the family profession. My sister and brother-in-law are both teachers. My aunt and uncle were both teachers. So everybody but me is a teacher in our family.
Oh, wow. I wanted to share this quote with our viewers. I keep saying listeners and viewers. You said, though I don't remember it, having a transplant at 14 months old left me with a profound sense of gratitude and obligation while fully embracing adversity. In what way?
So I grew up knowing that I had had a transplant. And at that time, there were no living donors. So I was aware that a child had died so that I could live, and that a family had made probably what would be the toughest decision any parent could face. I certainly can't imagine facing it, of giving up their child's organs. And so from that time, I was so aware that I had been given a second chance at life. It was just enmeshed in my experience growing up. And so I was very, very grateful. But I was also very aware of the fact that I was living for 2 people and that I needed to make it worth it. I needed to make that gift worth it. And so I grew up with that. It took me a long time to embrace that as an adversity. For a long time, I didn't want people to know I had a transplant. I didn't want to be the different person in school. But I've realized as an adult that really the adversity of that childhood experience has shaped who I am. So I had to grow up speaking to doctors. I had to speak to adults. I had to be able to communicate what I was feeling and what was going on in order to get treatment. And so I learned from a very young age how to communicate what was happening. And also, I learned that tough stuff happens sometimes, and it's not the end of the world, and you have to move on.
Well, certainly that plays into the role you have today, and we're going to be talking, much more about your role with the National Center for Victims of Crime. I have a question from a listener, and I think it was a good one. She said, with the explosion of true crime media, Do you view it as a positive for the awareness of what it brings, or do you think it can be insensitive to crime victims?
That's a question I've been getting a lot lately. And I love the question because I love the fact that there's an awareness to crime victims. I think the best answer starts with an acknowledgement that this fascination isn't new. The fascination with true crime dates back, and there are probably a lot of psychological reasons for that. But the fascination really started in the 1800s. What is new is our ability to consume these stories. And so I think that we can consume these stories and still be sensitive to the victims. And that's really the key part. We have to recognize that victims aren't characters in a ghost story. They're not characters that we hear about. They are very real humans. And they've experienced just profound loss. And so what might set them off one day might not set them off another day. We have to be careful in how we ask questions and accept that just because they've tried to make their stories known to get to a resolution does not mean that they've put themselves out to be public figures. I also have to say about this, there are armchair sleuths that are very well intentioned. We've all seen Don't F with Cats. That worked out well. It doesn't always. And I think folks need to be really, really careful about putting rumors and theories out there that aren't true. And then finally, I've got to note that most of what this true crime genre is right now has focused on white women predominantly. And there are women of color and Indigenous women that go missing or are murdered every day, and they're not getting the same level of focus. And I think that that starts to skew a narrative in a way that we don't want it. We really need to make sure we're focusing on all victims of crime. And I think the last thing that's really important to say about this, I worry about people who consume true crime 24/7. I think it's fun for a lot of people, but we've never had the ability to do this in our history. And you cannot be in this work and in this field every day and not have it affect you. And so if
Yes.
folks are consuming it 24/7, I think that they need to be very aware of any mental health issues that might start to spring up, because you just cannot consume this constantly and not be impacted. And it starts as fun and it starts as entertainment. And you might not expect some of the feelings and emotions that come up later.
It's similar, I think, to consuming news all day long, right?
Yes.
It's too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Renee, let's talk about why you decided to go into this field. I know you originally wanted to be an arts and theater major, so this is quite a jump to dealing with victims of crime. Can you tell us about your aunt, the story about your aunt, and why it led to your interest in this?
Sure. Well, as you noted, I was a theater major, but always had an interest in law. And when I went to law school, I wanted to do domestic violence work and child abuse prosecution. And that sprung from my aunt was the first woman in Ohio to plead battered women syndrome. And she had shot and killed her husband in a domestic violence incident. She had pulled out his shotgun and held it at him, and he had stuck his fingers into the barrel of the shotgun and pulled back, which caused it to trigger. So she spent 14 years in prison and learned a lot while she was in prison. But from a very young age, I saw how domestic violence can trigger so many other things and the long-ranging intergenerational impacts of trauma and abuse.
Wow, that's quite a story.
It is, and it almost seems unbelievable, but I will tell you, as an adult, I did pull the court records, and the actual medical evidence did back up that version of the story.
Wow. Do you remember how old were you when that happened?
I was 4 or 5.
Oh, so you were very young.
I was very young.
My guess is you have memories of something is happening within the family, but not understanding what it was.
That's exactly right. I remember that uncle, and I remember my aunt when she was not in prison, but I also remember sitting at my aunt's house on the day of sentencing and seeing, or I'm sorry, probably the day after sentencing, because I saw a picture of my mother, my other aunt, and my grandmother hugging my aunt. It was on the front page of the paper. And I
Wow.
had no idea why they were in the news. And then my mom came home and had to explain to me that my aunt was going away for a while.
Wow. Tell me, Renee, first of all, if you're just tuning in, I'm with Renée Williams, the Executive Director for the National Center for Victims of Crime. Tell me your first job out of college. What was that, and kind of what led to the actual position with the center?
The first job, I went right to law school after college. So while I was in college, I worked for the Young and the Restless, which not many people know.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's exciting.
it was fun. It was a fun internship. It was eye-opening. Definitely the reason I
I'm
ended up
sure.
going away from the business. My first job after law school was working as a clerk for a judge in a very small county in Pennsylvania. And I loved it, but clerkships, when you're an attorney, you know that a clerkship is probably only going to last about a year. I then went into corporate law. So even though I had started thinking I wanted to be a child abuse prosecutor, I had done well enough in school that I was getting offers, and shamefully the money and the promise of a very comfortable lifestyle initially
Mhm.
lured me to the corporate side. And I landed what a lot of people would consider the dream job. I was in-house at a large healthcare company in Pittsburgh. And probably about 2 or 3 years into that, I started to realize that I wasn't using my talents to the best of my ability, and I wasn't doing what I started out to do.
And what was that? When you think about that, what do you think your talents were that were underutilized?
Well, I thought I wanted to change the world. I think the talents that I had, I'm good at managing, I'm good at vision and pushing out a vision and getting other people really excited about my vision. And I found that while I was in corporate law, the position I was in, I was able to train people to do almost exactly what I was doing, to a point where they were so good at it, my reviews were getting to be boring. So it kind of felt like the cog in the wheel. And that really stinks as a feeling. And that's a really easy way to get
Mhm.
bored.
Right, right. You know, I'm always curious when you work in this kind of work, which is typically nonprofit and it's um, helping people. Do you feel that you are here meant to help women and children? Do you really feel like that's a calling for you?
Yeah, I was actually on the phone with our founder yesterday, Morris Gurley, and he said, Renee, this is an opportunity that not many people get. And I couldn't agree with him more. It is what I was called to do, but I've also been given an opportunity that not many people get. Not many people get the chance to make change on a large scale level. And I take that very seriously.
It's also a risk to leave a comfortable
It is.
job, right? As a professional, knowing that you have security and money coming in. How did you feel when you made that jump? Where did that confidence in yourself to do it come from?
Well, I think it's an even bigger risk to stay in the same position if you see
Mhm.
what your life is going to be ahead of you. So I think it's a bigger risk to stay. I had taken some management courses, I had taken some leadership courses at Carnegie Mellon, and so I thought at the time, and let me tell you, the first jump was not to the National Center. I was at a very small company in Pennsylvania that provided free legal aid to indigent folks, and so it was a much smaller company. I just thought, I know that I can give my all to this company. I know that I will work hard and I will push every day. I don't know everything, but I also know that I'm willing to learn. And I know that I'm going to have a team that if I listen to them, they will at least provide me guidance. And that was really how we ended up doing well at Laurel Legal. Was I came in with the wonderful knowledge that I didn't know everything. And in fact, I wasn't even sure what I didn't know and what I did know. So I was able to listen to people and
Mhm.
start to put the pieces into place. But I think even more so, I was able to look at things not from a this is how we've always done them. But if somebody came to me with that, I'd say, but that doesn't make sense anymore. So there was a real advantage to having a fresh perspective and to having the institutional knowledge.
You know, there's a real interesting story behind the launch of the National Center. And am I right? It's in its 35th year?
We are actually at 36. 7 years now. So yes,
Wow.
we've been around for a while.
Yeah. So ironically, Alla von Augsburg was a guest on my show probably last year. It was probably a year ago at this point. And she's one of the founders of the organizations. And I wonder if you can tell just briefly her story and why she decided to start this.
Sure. So her story is actually one of the original true crime interests in America. Her mother was Sunny von Bülow, who was an heiress. Alla and her brother Alex are both prince and princesses. They're Austrian, I believe, royalty. And so Sunny married a gentleman named Klaus Bülow. His real name was Klaus Bülow. He added a von in there to make himself sound aristocratic. And he
Is that right? I didn't realize that.
Fun fact.
Wow.
His name was Klaus Bülow, and he became Klaus von Bülow. So Klaus and Sunny were married for several years. They had another child together, and Sunny one day went into diabetic coma. She was revived that time, and then a second time she went into a second coma and never woke up. And she remained in a persistent vegetative state until 2008. So for over 20 years. Klaus was immediately suspected of trying to murder her, and he had several affairs going at the time. There's some rumors to whether Sunny did or did not know. However, he was convicted in the first trial, but Alan Dershowitz got involved, and a lot of true crime aficionados will know the name Alan Dershowitz, but Alan Dershowitz got involved. He got the conviction overturned on appeal. So there was a second trial where Klaus was acquitted. And then he took control of Sunny's person because she was still alive, but he also took control of her massive estate. So her children had to sue him to take control back of Sunny's person and of her estate. And on the eve of trial, Klaus actually signed off on all rights to her, on all rights to the inheritance, on the understanding that they would not pursue any further charges. He also agreed to move to Europe and to never come back to the United States. And so Alla and Alex received Sunny's inheritance. They were also receiving her mother's inheritance. And so with that, they decided to start the National Center. And it was because they had such a tough time in the court system. And the court system was so set against victims at that time that they realized if they as a wealthy family went through that, what would normal people be doing? And they didn't want to see that happen. And they thought that no victim should ever have to go through what their family did. So they founded our center.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. Listen, we're going to go into our first break. If you're listening from Talk Radio, WPHT, stay with us for our watch team. If not, we will be back with Renée Williams, again, the Executive Director for the National Center for Victims of Crime. We'll be right back.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope.
To learn more about who we are, what we do, and career opportunities with Local 98, visit us, IBEW98.org.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free. What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
It's a big story, and that can use.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Sue Rocco. I'm joined today by Renée Williams. Renee is the Executive Director for the National Center for Victims of Crime. I wanted to get into the organization and what you do. And my first question was, do you specifically help domestic violence victims, women in particular, and people from poor communities?
That is a loaded question. We do help victims of domestic violence, but not specifically. So we do have a victim services hotline that will provide direct services for any victims of crime. And we've been very conscious and very deliberate on remaining a center that is for all victims because of what we know about poly-victimization. Once a crime is committed, there are often a series of other crimes that somebody will become a victim of. So we make sure to stay completely broad and generalists. We also have several projects where we are working with low-income communities and specifically with communities of color right now. We've discovered in our work that there are a lot of gaps in services that mainstream organizations provide. They're providing outstanding services. They're trying very hard. They're doing amazing work, but there's a gap within where people can get to them. And so we're trying to bridge that gap and make sure that we're getting services into these communities.
Can you tell us, Renee, have you seen a rise in crime since COVID? I mean, there's been so many repercussions around the pandemic. What can you tell us about that?
I think right now that the rise in crime, especially violent crime, is well documented. I don't believe any of those statistics are exaggerated. I think that what we are seeing is an absolute rise right now.
And can everyone knows that in the current political climate, there's a lot of things happening around law enforcement, perpetrators' rights versus victims' rights. What can you share with us about what you're seeing and maybe some positive news about where things are headed?
So as far as the political environment, I think that that's become so loaded and it's really hurting crime victims. We've turned tough on crime, soft on crime into a political football. And that's not focusing on the victims of crime. They're still getting left in the dust. NCVC actually is a huge supporter of prison reform. We do quite a bit of work with prison reform partners because we believe that is what's going to lead to a safer community, is doing the correct and appropriate rehabilitation. I think historically, and I won't get too much into it, but we saw in the 60s and 70s this increase of incarceration, and it's really not made communities safer. It's not made us safer. So I do think that there are a lot of reform efforts that we are working on right now that give me hope for a safer society. And I also think that there's been more of a focus on victims and victims' rights, especially within the past 5 years. And there's been a lot of forward motion. So I think that from my perspective, victims are getting to a safer space, or a space where their rights are more recognized. And we're no longer pitting the victim against a perpetrator, because the justice system, I will tell you, does not work for anybody. It doesn't work for victims. Yeah. Being tough on crime doesn't work for victims. Being soft on crime doesn't work for victims. It just doesn't work. And so we really need to focus on victimization at its genesis if we want to start to see a pendulum swing.
In preparing for this interview, I was talking with my husband about prison reform and, what are alternatives? And I'd love to know your personal view. We talk often about rather than prison, giving perpetrators, criminals, jobs to do, somehow the ability to contribute back to society. And I'm not talking about the very, very severe, dangerous criminals. What do you think about that idea?
I think that would work. There are a lot of countries that have similar models. I think that from a victim perspective, and we're always very clear about this, I cannot speak for all victims. I can give you quotes and stats, but each individual victim is going to have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own mindset of what should happen. I think that the best chance we have right now is rehabilitation within prisons, if prison's called for. But I agree that prison is not actually always called for. And I think we've over-criminalized a lot of things in this country, and I do believe it was based on race.
Can you tell us if someone is a victim of crime and they come to your organization, what kinds of things are they going to be receiving?
Sure. So we have Victim Connect, which is our hotline, and people can call, chat, or text us. They will get at least a half an hour. We try to provide emotional support. And then because we're national, we will try to set them up with resources and a safety plan in their state and locally where they can go to execute each of the things that we've discussed. We also, many of our larger programs are actually providing training and technical assistance to any victim service professionals. So those would be judges, prosecutors, attorneys, police officers, victim advocates. We really are the go-to for providing the training to them on what best practices are in the field.
I'm very curious, Renee, how you manage your own daily anxiety and emotions, seeing the things that you do on a daily basis.
That would be one of the hardest things. One of the hardest parts of my job is actually telling people that I can't help them, because there are some people that we cannot help. There just aren't the resources, there aren't the services. And so that's very difficult, as well as the other parts of my job. I do love animals. I have horses here, which are great. Equine therapy is amazing. A little dog I snuggle with. So I've tried to create outlets in my personal life and outside of work that I can kind of vent to, because there's no avoiding some of the tough work. But sometimes I embrace the tough work. I mean, that's why I'm here. And again, it goes back to, this is an opportunity, and not many people get the opportunity to help others.
Yeah. What is the most rewarding for you? It's when I interview women who work in tough fields, and I ask that question always, how do you remain hopeful? They usually say, because of, the success we're having, the difference we're making.
I think for me, it's every time we discover a new solution. So we are working on a project in Maryland right now where my team is solutioning some ideas for one of the communities here. And it's really exciting. And it has the opportunity to become something huge nationally. And so it's discovering those tiny little solutions that make the big differences.
Can you talk about any specific one, something that you're working on?
Sure. So we are working on a program with the inner city communities here, where we are actually going into the communities and training community leaders to respond to crime victims, so that crime victims don't have to get to a shelter, or they don't necessarily have to have interaction immediately with law enforcement.
Okay. Tell me, are you one of few women working in this field? So you're in charge of this entire organization. Are there few women doing this work?
We are the rare field where it is mostly women. And I think that's because women are naturally a little bit more empathetic. We're more empathetic, I would say. But so we have, actually, my entire senior team is female led. Our board co-chair is Kim Goldman. And so we are predominantly female led in this field.
And can you tell me, when you think about your own leadership style, what are the things that you do to keep your team motivated and create a culture where, everyone's getting up every day and eager to do the hard work?
So we've created a culture of being very conscious of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue because there's a lot of that.
Right.
And I think, especially in this field, in the victim services field, most of my team has their own passion. I mean, they got into this field for a reason, and they live it and they breathe it, and they're excited about it, which makes it awesome to work with. As far as my management style and my management training, my team knows that we are the safest space for them to make a mistake. I've gone out of my way to try to make it very safe for them to make errors as long as they know they're thinking. So I would rather them make a mistake and come to me and say, hey, I screwed up. And I could say, well, why did you do this? What was your thought process? Let's walk through there. That was incorrect. Rather than coming to me for every single thing and asking me, I want them to be thinking and be visionaries on their own and be out there and figuring things out. And I'll provide guidance if they need help. But if they make a mistake, they're not in trouble if they can tell me that they thought it through.
Have you actually been working from a home office since the pandemic, or do you have an office that you go to?
We've been all over the place. I have an office that I do go to. We are based out of Arlington, Virginia. I am home right now. We've tried to come back several times, and then Delta, Omicron, every single variant, we've gotten set back. So even before the pandemic, we had the option. We were in the office 2 days a week, out 3 days. But if people wanted to come in more, they were welcome to. So we are trying to get back to that. Right now, it's optional for everybody.
Okay. I always love to know who, I think when we talk about women who have achieved levels of success in leadership, there's often someone in their life that believes in them. I wonder if you can think of somebody that perhaps gave you some of the best advice you've ever had, and who that might be.
That was my mom. And I think for a lot of people, it's probably their mother. But this goes back to my transplant. So it's a story, because it has to be a story. When I was probably about 4, right post-transplant, my mom put me into a swimming class that I did not want to take. And she agreed to be an instructor for another class. So she was in the pool, but at the opposite side of the pool at the time. And on this particular day, I decided that I didn't want to put my face in the water. There was no reason. There was no reason I couldn't. There was nothing. But I just, in my 4-year-old mind, didn't want to do it. And so I looked at the instructor and I said, I can't put my face in water because I had a liver transplant.
Oh.
And she bought it. She bought it. And I was very proud of myself. I was congratulating myself for a hot minute. I saw her walking across the pool to get my mom. And I thought, oh no. So actually, my mom started to walk across the pool. I jumped in. I went face first.
You did? Oh my gosh.
I thought I could avoid the storm that was coming. So I came up from the water and I saw my mom's feet, and she went, she gave me the "come here, young lady."
Oh, that's scary, that finger. Come here. Yeah.
And we walked across the pool, and she was very gently playing with my bathing suit right here, right next to my neck and the collar, and very quietly said, young lady, has anybody ever told you that there's something you can't do because of your transplant? And I said, no, ma'am. And she said, so why did you say that? And I said, I didn't want to put my face in the water. And she said, you will never tell anybody that you can't do something, regardless of whether it's the transplant or not.
Wow.
You will not tell somebody that you can't do it. And you will not tell yourself that. And then she followed up with, do you understand me, young lady? And that's when you know you're in trouble. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I never tried that again.
Right. Oh my gosh, it's amazing, those memories we have that are so, so vivid. I mean, 4 is young. That's really young, that you carry that memory with you.
And it's one of her favorite stories because she likes to tell it to show how stubborn I was, because I was very stubborn. But I do remember, and I remember you will never tell anybody that there's something you can't do.
Wow.
Not because of the transplant and not because of anything else.
Not because of anything. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. If you're just tuning in, I'm joined by Renée Williams. Renée is the executive director for the National Center for Victims of Crime. If someone's watching, Renee, and it happens to be a woman who's looking perhaps to make that transition from one industry to something completely different, and perhaps something that she's always felt she was meant to do, what would that advice be?
I would tell people to be smartly spontaneous. So don't follow a path for yourself that you think is set out because it's easy and comfortable, because you'll regret it in the long run. But don't be stupid and just go out there and start looking for things left, right, and center. So what I did, you know, people, when you look at my career path, it was set there. It does kind of make sense, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it at first, but find what you can do and what you want to do and make meaningful decisions to make that change.
You know, there's so many resources and communities and networks and things for women today to go to kind of get that help. But I always say, I think it has to really come from within. What are the things that have inspired you throughout your career where maybe you've had that light bulb moment or that aha moment?
So I will say we were just at CrimeCon, which is an interesting true crime extravaganza. And I had a young woman on stage whose sister had been murdered and had been missing for years. And she actually said to the audience that nobody treated her like a human. Everybody treated her like a story. And I was the first person to tell her that I was going to protect her on that stage. It was my job to make that stage a safe space.
Wow.
And she said, and Renee's fulfilled every part of that promise. And she's been the first person in 10 years of going through this to treat me like a human. And that was so impactful to me because I thought, you know, we think we've made so many strides, but just the mere act of treating somebody how I would want to be treated still has such an impact.
Why do you think there has, why do you think there's been this lack of connection for victims? What is going on?
So our Constitution is set up for defendants, and I would want it that way. This isn't a commentary on the Constitution. I would want it that way. But I think that we've become so focused on the story and the defendants. And I think for victims, especially in high profile cases, we assume that because they put their story out there, they're always willing to talk about it. And we kind of forget that they don't always have to be willing to talk about something, and I think that's where the disconnect is. We start to look at them more as a story and a character.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the progress we've made with regard to DNA, right, and solving crimes? I'm always fascinated with that. You know, the ability that we have today to do that. What do you know about it, and where do you see it going?
I think it's wonderful. I still think, there's obviously still limitations in that you have to find the match. And so we're still seeing so many cold cases that just can't be solved because there's not a match. It's not in the system. I hope that it starts to prevent some wrongful convictions. That would be my goal.
Yeah. And I think it's happening, you know. Mm-hmm. We just have a few minutes left. I'd love for you to, is there's someone who you've met through your journey, a victim who inspired you, their ability to overcome once you were able to help them?
My dad was a victim of crime, severe crime, when he was a child, and his ability to still love unconditionally and to still be a wonderful human being, and to not have let what happened to him impact how he treats other humans. And it was at a time when there weren't services for children his age. And so he went through the first 50 years of his life not receiving services. He's only recently been able to receive services. And nevertheless, he still woke up every day. He still tried. And he still was a kind and wonderful person to everybody he met.
That's really beautiful. Was he able to receive any kind of counseling or emotional support, which is often good? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But again, it was 50 years later. And that's a large part of where I see the intergenerational trauma as well. But he has been able to now receive services and continues with services. But he's a large part of the reason I got into this field and that I continue to do what I do.
And I think the good news is as well today, it's so much more acceptable to talk about these things than it was 50 years ago, certainly, and especially for men, right? Mm-hmm. Women seem to have their team of other women to talk through things, and I think that I think it's tougher for men to admit that they're struggling.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, this is the end of the show, and I'm so incredibly grateful for you to take time to share your life story. I appreciate it, Renee.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're going to go into a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Sherry Morrison, our brand new Lifestyle Watch contributor. We'll be right back.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope.
To learn more about who we are, what we do, and career opportunities with Local 98, visit us, IBEW98.org.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Acton News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm Sue Rocco, and you're watching Women to Watch. I'm joined now. I'm very excited to bring onto the show Sherry Morrison. Sherry's going to be leading a lifestyle watch segment for us every week on the show and putting a spotlight on women who are trailblazers within their fields of the arts and restaurants and retail. And that's, it's a field that's been hit very hard since the pandemic. So I'm excited to have Sherry's input. Sherry, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and be a part of Women to Watch.
Well, I love your background. It's beautiful and serene.
Thank you.
And I'm
tiny
really
little kitchen, but I love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Hey, listen, natural light and windows, right? It's good for the soul.
Lots of it.
So I thought we'd start with your sharing with our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background and kind of what led you to be involved in the consulting that you've done in special events, and you started your own company, went to the culinary school. So just a brief background so people get to know you.
Sure. I've always been a people person and into hospitality in some manner. My mom used to tease me when I was very little because I always said I wanted to be, I'm talking about 7 or 8 years old, that I always wanted to be a bartender and a psychiatrist.
Oh,
Who at that age understands that a bartender is a psychiatrist is
correct.
crazy. But anyway, that's kind of where I started out. And then I got involved with a little bit of modeling as I was growing up through high school and college and after college, and went to school, was super involved in sports year round, and went to William and Mary and decided I wanted to leave to go to the Culinary Institute of America. I had worked for caterers through junior high and high school and loved it. So I went to the Culinary Institute. So I'm a chef by trade. Don't do a lot of cooking in restaurants pretty much ever. A little bit during school and right after, but I started my own business at a fairly young age, and got involved in all aspects of the hospitality industry, whether it's been cooking, restaurants, catering, event planning, manufacturing. So my company, which was a small restaurant in one of the local train stations that we renovated, morphed into, because one of our customers was the owner of a large grocery chain called Gennardi Supermarkets. They asked me if I would be interested in making fresh soups for their stores. So my restaurant morphed into manufacturing, which I did for 23 years, and eventually sold the company and got involved with consulting for a lot of the people that I met over the years, selling soups and sauces and side dishes too.
Delicious soups, by the way. I had them.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've just always been super involved. And while I was doing all that, I did a lot of nonprofit work with Ronald McDonald House and Gift of Life programs. So they're all things that have kind of come full circle and are things that I'm interested in doing later in life. And as I've gone that full circle, not only have I learned a lot about it, but now I can add a lot to the different programs by getting back involved with them again. So yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to bring this new segment to the show, because I think, when we think about the pandemic and what's happened to industries and having to just suddenly out of the blue pivot and, look at how their companies are going to do business, lifestyle was hit really hard. Obviously, there were no events. People weren't going places. They weren't shopping. They weren't going to dinner. And you're going to be bringing us these really inspirational stories of women who have continued to make it happen and are doing new things. Tell us what you envision for this segment and what you hope to bring to the show.
Well, I hope to profile women in and around the Philadelphia area. There's so many great stories of people who have been resilient over the years and just outside of the box thinkers. And whether it's food and beverage, which is what I've been involved with, or events most of my career, whether it's food and beverage or fashion, design, decor, diet, nutrition, events, health, travel. I mean, you name it, there's a lot to cover, and so many dynamic personalities right around here. People should know and be aware of them, because, they've been resilient and going through all of these things just in the last couple of years. If you can make it through all of that, you can make it through almost anything, really.
And am I right that there's a story that you kind of uncovered that you might be bringing to the show, having to do with dance and math?
Yeah. So I met this really interesting woman who started this company or group. It's called Kinetic Literacy Program, or M3. And it involves discovering math and concepts through math, music, and movement. So I'm not sure exactly, don't have a date for that yet, but very interesting, because, sometimes kids don't learn the traditional way, and she's taken it to a whole new level, and it's really just taken off with a lot of the different ballet companies in Philadelphia and surrounding area. So
yeah, that is so interesting. I'm dying to know the connection, how the two can possibly come together, but They
I
do.
don't know. We call it the two-step. So maybe if we multiply the two-step, we'll come up with the four-step. I'm not sure.
Can you tell me what you've seen, Sherry, when, you've been out and about, and actually you were, running a winery, but you've been very close to planning events, watching them happen, and really pulling them all together. What has been the greatest challenge over the past 2 years?
Oh my gosh.
Big question, but
yeah, I mean, keeping people
other than getting sick
and safe and still able to have an event,
right,
is the biggest thing. And consistency. The city has not been kind to the event industry through all of this, with mask on, mask off. Even if you are in a company or involved with different work programs, the guidelines were not the same for the event industry as they were some of these other organizations. And it just seemed very unfair because there was no proof that, COVID was being passed as a result of somebody having a wedding and people wearing masks. There wasn't a lot of consistency. So anyway, I think that was the biggest challenge, was finding a way to still hold events where people felt safe and you were still operating within the guidelines that were laid out for it.
Yeah, it really was kind of all over the place. And it's still a little scary trying to figure out, how to go out into the world and not get sick. But I think it's pretty clear to everyone now we're going to have to learn to live with it on some level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? The other thing is a lot of people are pivoting and operating with an open air type environment or outside.
Yes.
You see all these restaurants that build outside locations, event venues that have added outdoor locations and spaces. People are just figuring out that, where there's a will, there's a way. So
I know people are amazing.
The industry is all about is, we're scrappy people.
Right. Yeah.
The restaurant industry is not for sissies. That's for
No, it is not. No, it is not. And the ability to kind of pivot, change on a dime, if something's happening. That's been one of my favorite things that came out of it, was all of a sudden the creation of these beautiful outdoor spaces, which now are going to remain the case. So most restaurants that are opening will have an outdoor space because they have to.
Yeah. And before COVID, I used to look for restaurants or locations where we could sit and enjoy the outside.
I did as well.
Yeah, when you're working inside, the last thing you want to do on your night out when it's beautiful is sit inside and be around, enclosed environments. So add a little beauty to your world and a little fresh air.
Yeah, like your beautiful flowers behind you.
There you go.
Let me ask you, Sherry, when you think back over your career, what is it that you most love about creating these beautiful spaces for people to enjoy?
Just appreciation for everything that we have around us naturally that a lot of people don't realize until they have a special event. I've set a lot of tables. I've done a lot of decor inside people's homes and things. And it's just by using simple things that are, I call it, making a flower arrangement out of weeds or just leftovers, scrappy things that a lot of people will throw out. It's like, you've got a lot of beautiful things that are around you all the time. And when you put it together and people see it, it's like, I never would have thought of doing that. Like, it's
that's the thing. Everyone doesn't have that ability. I mean, you're so very good at it. And I think it truly is a gift. I think I know for me, I know what I like and what I don't, but I don't have a big vision of a picture and what to do to make it come togetger. I can't do that.
Yeah. I think I grew up in a very artistic environment. All of my family is artistic from way back when. We've all been outside of the box thinkers and entrepreneurs. So I think that's a big influence on what I've done with my life. And I I don't like the traditional lifestyle of being inside and working for other people. And, I'm kind of always looking for another way or a new idea or just very outside of the box.
Yeah, a free spirit. I don't think there's going to be, the 9 to 5 in an office setting is kind of really going by the wayside, which I think is wonderful. The hybrid now, the ability for people to kind of choose to be productive at home, or perhaps go and collaborate with people, a team at an office.
A new lifestyle.
Yeah, a new lifestyle.
Totally
100%
lifestyle for the work world, which is fantastic.
For the world, you know what I mean? It's an entire global shift.
Yeah, and can save so much. I mean, why are businesses paying for people to be under a roof when you have a home, you have the ability to work remotely and communicate like we are now? Why not take advantage of that and save some money and save the environment and the gas and the paper and everything else?
Yeah,
we can. So why don't we? So, perfect example of lifestyle changes that are beneficial, that maybe was a plus from COVID.
Definitely. I'm really so excited to add this new segment to the show, and I'm looking forward to meeting new women every week that you're going to be profiling. If you're just tuning in, I'm Sue Rocco, and this is Women to Watch, and I'm joined by our brand new Lifestyle Watch contributor, Sherry Morrison. That is it for the very first show on 6abc.com. Thank you so much to ABC for helping us to shine a light on women doing incredible work from around the world. And I hope you'll tune in next week for my interview with Reshma Sojani. Reshma is the founder of Girls Who Code. So again, you can listen to the show on WPHT, or you can tune into 6abc.com. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope.
To learn more about who we are, what we do, and career opportunities with Local 98, visit us, IBEW98.org.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.